These types of questions we can take now to Congressman Bill Huizenga, who joins us, represents Michigan in the Congress, and joins us from the Hill this afternoon. To that point, Congressman, how about this idea that maybe Republicans are in the game for the union vote this time around? How do you see it?
Well, things have certainly changed, and Connell, good to be with you. I appreciate the opportunity. I use my own family as an example. I come from the western side of Michigan, where it's traditionally more Republican, and I talk to my Republican cousins over there, and they're not real enthusiastic about being a Republican or Donald Trump. I also, the other half of my family is from Flint. My grandfather was part of the first original sit-down strikes, and I've got cousins who are current and retired UAW, and I talk to them, and they're nothing but enthusiastic about Trump and where the Republicans are going. And I had one cousin of mine say, I could never call myself a Republican, but... And then I knew we had her at that point,
funny.
Right? So there's things like that where it's the political landscape, especially in a place like Michigan, has really kind of been turned upside down in the last couple of election cycles.
Or it's right on the verge of being, quite possibly. I guess the question would be, what do you do to kind of bring that vote home? In other words, even the union president, Shawn Fain, who was on one of the Sunday shows a few weeks back, said, somebody's got to earn this endorsement. We're not just going to give it out anymore. So that opens the door, like you're talking about for Republicans, but you do have to earn it. How do Republicans earn union voters as they go through these negotiations with the automakers?
Well, and the key is the union members, not the union leadership, because the head of the UAW was also at one point critical of President Trump coming to Michigan and showing that support. I think he backed off of that because they'll admit that a third of their membership votes Republican, and it's probably more than that. And we know that it's certainly in Michigan. All you have to do is look at the numbers where people split their ticket on a pretty regular basis, where President Trump earned much more than that. And you talk to other unions, whether it's Teamsters or others, they know that there's a significant number of their own membership, CWA, communication workers, utility workers.
Sure.
They know that there's a significant number of their membership that are voting Republican. Again, they may not call themselves a Republican, or certainly not a traditional Republican, but they are open and sympathetic to the message because they're feeling it in their pocketbook. They're looking at where gas prices are. They're looking at all this focus on social engineering and not economic issues, and they're feeling very alienated and frustrated by what had been traditionally their party.
Well, let me ask you specifically about that, because it sounds like, and you can correct me if I'm wrong after I put these numbers on the screen, that you're trying to get the vote of these union members without necessarily supporting what their leadership is pushing for. In other words, not supporting their issues. For example, the United Auto Workers demands, we'll look at these, 36% raises 4 years, 32-hour work week, reinstating the cost of living protections, restoring traditional pensions, which have gone away in large part in private sector America. Are those things that you do not support, yet you still want the support of the people who are fighting for them? Is that what you're saying?
Well, here's what I support. I support men and women, working men and women, their ability to go and demand what they would like to get. Now, whether a 4-day work week is realistic, I have my doubts about that. But what we do know is they have felt very much under economic assault. And they've seen where the car makers themselves have been doing very well. Now, there's a lot of uncertainty, and I would argue, frankly, that this administration has created some of that uncertainty with their massive blind push towards EVs.
Right.
And the UAW members that I talk to are very concerned about what that means for the future. And if you talk to management, and whether it's in parts makers or whether it's in original equipment manufacturers, they might be doing okay now, but they have a lot of questions about what the future looks like. The Ford just announced that it was pausing its battery factory in Michigan, in Marshall, Michigan, just outside my district. And there's a lot of questions about supply chain and about China's involvement and those kinds of things. So all of that really leads to a lot of unsettlement.
Thank you for watching. Go to newsnationnow.com to find News Nation on your television provider. And don't forget to click the red subscribe button below to get more of News Nation's fact-driven, unbiased coverage.